watching the rise. And I wouldn't say I'm shocked, cause I'm hardly surprised. This one's for the ride, this one's for who knew I'd make it, just needed some time. This one's for my wife, could've left 1,000 times just about my side.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Randy Kaye, and I'm the host of the Caught Up podcast. Today we have Jimmy Kolaitis, who has over 20 years of coaching experience and is currently the first full-time athletic director at Northeast Community College in Alabama. Jimmy also has a resume of Pac-12 conference championships, Women's College World Series appearances, National Pro Fast Pitch League championships, and international play with Team USA. Jimmy, it's always great to see you. Thanks for taking the time to catch up.
I appreciate it, Randy.
Hey, how are things, man? Happy International Men's Day.
That's what I hear.
Right. I told you earlier, I think I saw on X there was a post of you and Tim Walton, and I thought it was kind of ironic that we were jumping on a call, a little bit later that morning, but I appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
How does it feel being home? You're an Alabama native, right?
I was born in New York, but I moved to Alabama when I was 15. I consider Alabama home. That's where my family lives.
Okay.
So it's good to be home. I've lived just about everywhere in the state, the southern part, the central, the east, and now it's the north. We're pretty close to Chattanooga. If you follow country music, we're right next to the home of the group Alabama. So we are up in the mountains right off the lake. So it is it's good to be home. It's good to be back around family, and it's just I've been on all over the country, so it's good to kind of settle down a little bit.
Cool. And when you talk about when you look up you, or everything I've ever known about you has been, you've been hitting and recruiting. Like that, it seems to be what has kind of built your name at one point. I know you've been considered as one of the, premier hitting coaches in the country. Let's talk about hitting a little bit. What, obviously kids are going to come to your school and they're going to get trained, but the hitting piece, and you and I both know this, that if you can hit, there's a spot for you. So like for you, when you get a kid, like what are you looking for in hitters? What do you make important? What's your philosophy on hitting?
Hit the ball hard.
Hit the ball hard. Is that in the air or on the ground?
I tell you what, a 90-mile-per-hour ball that's lifted it has a chance to get out, but a ball hit 90 miles per hour on the ground also has a chance to find a hole. So
right.
I think it's just three things I really try to kind of start with, and I kind of go backwards with today's game. And number one is, we want to go ball and play. I think putting the ball in play is important. Now, what does that mean? I think a ball in play with force. That doesn't mean, hey, just chop it and put it on the ground. Like we want to be able to have some barrel awareness and some timing. I think we've gotten away from that. We were so worried in all these data and numbers and how hard it comes off the bat. I think I saw the other day somebody posted something about, the guy that led the big leagues in hitting last year was very average in bat speed. But he's got barrel awareness and he's got timing. So I think the ball and play piece is where I try to teach first. And then from there, we work the middle to the other side of the field. I don't want to say completely opposite side of the field, but, some hitters will pull the outer half to the middle, which is fine. But when they learn to use both sides of the field. And then the third thing is we develop the power. And when we're able to do all three of those, I think, nowadays is we want to develop the power before we develop the hit ability. And so I kind of go the other way. When I'm out there looking and recruiting, I think it's, there's just so many pieces, right? I mean, it's, if I'm looking at a hitter and I'm like, hey, she's okay, but I don't really know what to do with her, that's probably not somebody that I want to bring in. But if I look at somebody and go, hey, there's some tools there, but I think there's some things that we can work on, and I have a pretty good plan with it, we'll try to get them in and develop. So there's just so many different pieces, and when you have a lineup, you want a good mix, bringing somebody with some speed, some hitability, some ball on the ground, some juice. And I'm not against a strikeout, but it's going to happen. But we don't need to be striking out, 8 out of our 10 outs.
Right. What about a kid that, because I've seen this over the years too, that a kid that maybe fundamentally doesn't do everything right, but does fine barrel, does have some good barrel awareness, and puts the ball in play hard. What about a kid like that, especially going from travel ball to college or looking to go to college?
That's the evaluation piece, right? You have to evaluate that and go, is that going to work?
Right.
There's a sequence somewhat on, but there's just some things that are unorthodox. I remember when I first started at South Alabama, all I heard was how bad Michael O'Teefe's hitting style was. Here we are
Yeah.
15 years later, and a lot of people are teaching what he did back then.
Yep.
It was just a different look, but there were some things that were right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that were right. So, for me, I just if there's some hitability there, and I feel like if I think the unorthodox piece will struggle when because the biggest difference between the travel ball, the high school, and the next level, it depends on what level. What may work on the junior college level may not work at the D1. What works at the mid major may not work at the Power Five. Because you're seeing different stuff every day. So I think you have to evaluate and go, hey, will she have a chance, or is that going to be too big of a, to see a candidate that's 70 and up compared
Yeah.
to a mid major where, doesn't mean they don't have those arms, but you don't see them quite as consistent. But
Right. Not as
hitability is
deep.
important. It's important. I've had plenty of them. I had a catcher at Oregon my first couple of years that was very unorthodox. She was an All-American. She's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I struggle with that a little bit, and sometimes I get caught up more in, man, the swing doesn't look good, or she's out of sequence here or there. But then, if you go back and look, man, the kid, every time she gets up, she does seem to have a good at bat or a competitive at bat. And then, when she does hit the ball, it seems hard. So it's, to me, it's like I was curious about that piece. Like, what is there anything like um a deal breaker or a non-negotiable that you see in a kid, a swing under those circumstances that you're like, yeah, I can't do nothing with that. That's
I've always been big on, if I'm going to recruit somebody or bring somebody in, that I think camp is extremely important, because when
yeah.
you're working with them, you start figuring out uh, the coachability piece and the
Hmm.
feel piece. Do they feel what they're doing? If a hitter, I've had some average hitters that came in that had some really good feel, that understood what their body did, that turned into great hitters.
Yeah.
I've also had
Yeah.
some really good hitters that were uncoachable, or kind of stuck in the way they're going to do things, that struggled on the collegiate level because of that. So I think getting to know the hitters that you're bringing in, just going to watch and recruiting, going, yeah, that kid can really hit. Yeah, but are they going to fit what we're trying to do? Are they going to buy into what we're trying to do?
Yeah. Is there anything out there that maybe you've embraced over the years as far as philosophy, or um is there anything that you were opposed to that you've kind of embraced, or is there anything out there on the other end of that you're like, yeah, I totally oppose to that, and I'll, like launch angle, or is there anything like that out there that you just don't buy into?
Not really. I think for me, it's always learning and not trying
Yeah.
to get too on one side or the other. I remember when they did the slugfest with Major League Baseball, and all those guys down in the Tampa area. I went down there, and it was kind of things that I was not used to. What we found out, but I just wanted to learn.
Hmm.
I think the data and the analytics and all that stuff is great, but I think it's how you use it more than what you're using. And that's what I've tried to learn, is how do you take that information and develop hitters? Is the information just good for the coaches? Is it something that we need to share with the athlete? Or is it just kind of a lot of eyewash, right? A lot of eye candy.
Right.
So for me, it's always learning, always continuing to grow and going, hey, every hitting person I've worked with, or I've been around, I think I pick something up.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are things that I teach to hitters that maybe I don't agree with, or I don't think but it works for them.
Hmm.
And then when you bring in all these different types of hitters, when you understand and learn, I think so many hitting coaches will hear something and be like, oh, that's wrong. Well, maybe the next hitter you bring in learned that or was taught that way. So how do you now you can relate to him, because you're like, okay, I understand what you were taught, but hey, here's a different route to go. I remember a guy a long time ago you said sometimes you got to take the bad information out to put the good information in. instead of just teaching the way that you're teaching.
Yeah.
And so, again, I don't think there's anything. I don't have like a nope. I don't think that's absolutely wrong. But I do try to learn of what everybody's doing and try to implement it as simple as I can, depending on the type of athlete you have.
Yeah, like there's times where, to your point that like kids are a little bit stuck in their ways, and I try not to like badmouth or say anything negative about certain things, even if I don't agree with them, because like you said, I think, there's reasons that coaches are teaching, and a lot of times I think they're right on track, and then they just kind of missed one thing.
Right.
And so it looks like I'm trying to teach this kid this versus, maybe what you believe in. But when it comes to getting better or learning as a coach or as a hitting coach, what would you recommend? Are there certain classes or conventions that you go to or have gone to that you'd recommend?
I mean, there's so much out there, right? I mean, there's between the softball and baseball convention, and
Which one's better?
uh, I have always found, um, I think they're both beneficial.
Hmm.
Personally, I've always liked the ABCA a little bit more. I think they're more willing to give information sometimes than some of the NFCA stuff. I
Okay.
think sometimes they're guarded with what they're trying to say, but there's just so much more at the baseball. There's more speakers and more. They go through all different levels, and I think and I may get hammered for this, but I think baseball at all levels and the lower level are taught better than softball. Um, and so I think you've got some really quality. I mean, I've been around and there's some really good high school softball coaches, but there's some really good baseball high school coaches. So I just think there's more on that level. So you can learn it, from the bottom level all the way up, and they have all those speakers there, which has been pretty good.
Cool. And when do you know when that is?
They're both good, Randy. They're both good.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I've honestly never been to the NFCA convention. I need to go. I know I need to go. But I have heard that the baseball event is that like a lot of big colleges go to those. Some
Yeah.
of the people that are considered, on that level of elite hitting instructors or coaches, they go to that stuff. And I mean, and we know baseball's always a little bit ahead, right? Or
Yeah.
usually seems like they're a little bit more ahead, but yeah, I've got to get myself out to that kind of stuff. Um, I saw you, obviously hitting we talked about, but I also saw you spent some time as a pitching coach.
Oh man, it was really good to be a pitching coach when you had Monica Abbott, right?
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah. So that that year, we had it was an interesting summer. I had some calls to go to some different places in that league, and Jerry Glasgow got the gig down in Houston, and he said he wanted me to come with him. And I mean, Jerry always does the hitting, and then we had a couple other people. Joe came down there, and Mike Stairwald, who was in the NPF for a while. So we all went down there, and we had four people that none of us really did pitching. So I was like, well, I'm also a catcher, so I can, and I really, at that level, you don't really teach mechanics. So it was more, preparation and bullpens and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was interesting, but it was fun, but when you got money, it's pretty easy.
What did you take out of that? I mean, like we kind of joke and you even laughed about it, but there had to be some things that you pulled out of there that have been a benefit to you, right?
Yeah, you start, you're around all those great athletes, and
Uh-huh.
I did the pitching, but we were all we were all kind of just doing different things on that club. But it was awesome to kind of be around some of the people I was around with. It was the first time I've known Jerry forever, but it was the first time I actually got to coach with him, and Mike I'd been with before, and that was my first really go around. Even though I'd known Joe for a while, first time really coaching with Joe. So. So we got to learn a lot from each other, just the different types of players on the team. You get to learn a little bit, at that pro level, when you've got the real pros, their routine stuff and how they think and what they do and why they do it. If you spend a week watching a Monica Abbott, her routine is there's a reason why she's great.
Yeah.
She's there in the morning before everybody. She does her routine. She does her stretching. When practice is done, like she throws a bullpen, she's probably there another hour or two doing PFP all on her own. PFP.
Yeah.
She had an issue where she was stepping off the rubber where she's getting called illegal. She sat there by herself. She called, hey, can you go at first base and see if I'm illegal? And she threw, 30 minutes of making sure she's like her preparation and her thought process was pretty impressive. And with all these hitters and athletes I've had to coach over the last few years with the pro and the national team, I love having conversations with them and seeing their thought process and their approach and how they work and what they're looking to do. It's just so different, but it's elite, and that's why those athletes are where they're at.
Yeah. And how are you able to take that information and kind of relay it over to your athletes that you coach, whether it's the collegiate level, or the camps that you're putting on? How do you pass that on?
I think sometimes when you get into, I think all coaches at times we get into tunnel vision, and when I'm on those levels, I'm more of a student sometimes, and it
Mm-hmm.
reminds me to be a student even at where I'm at. You still got to teach and you still got to have a plan, but sometimes it's good to listen to what your athletes are talking about and what they feel instead of nope, this is how we got to do it. This is how we got to coach. I think the ego gets a hold of us, and I've been definitely faulted for that at times. But it reminds me that what separates it's not talent for sure at times, but you have a lot of talented players that never reach the elite level like some of those others, and I think their mindset is what separates them and the way they think and what they think, and so it reminds me to kind of, hey, it's not all about mechanics, and it's, hey, let's make sure that we're working on the other aspects of the game as well.
When you talk about that mindset, how do we as coaches, how do we recognize that or get into that more with them?
You got to spend time on it.
Just spend time.
That's it. I think, what I was doing at ASU those last few years, I would sit down every week with players, with athletes that wanted to do it. It was nothing that at no point did I ever force it on any of the athletes, and sit down and talk about what they're thinking and how they're thinking, and we went over some. I would give them some things to work on when they went home. I mean, you expect a hitter to be good, you expect them to go hit. You expect a pitcher to be good, they go throw. You can't work on the mindset if they're not working on it. And you've got to get, and it's amazing what you hear from your athletes when you don't know because you don't ask. And sometimes they get sideways because they're frustrated, and the athletes' minds, the athletes have changed over the years in what they're thinking. Just the way they grow up nowadays. So, I mean, the one that I really, locked into when I first got to ASU was Yanni Acuna. I mean, Yanni wasn't even getting on the field, and that's somebody that we continue to work over the 2 years, 3 years, and she, you can talk to her now, and she put the time and effort in to change the way she thinks, and she ended up being 2-time All-American. So, and that's not because of me; it's because she chose to put in the work. I had athletes that were there that came in and go, "Hey, I want you to do what you did to Yanni," and 2 weeks later they quit because they didn't want to put in the work.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, they have to make that decision, and it's kind of funny too because because for us at the travel ball level, as there's now become this new thing, national teams, of kids flying all over and playing in different places, and I wonder, like, what does that do for the team as far as chemistry when you don't practice together? Because I think practice is pretty important, and I was going to ask you that question. And I also thought maybe those types of kids have that mindset that you're talking about. They're going to go, like the Monica Abbotts, and go, they're going to get all their work in. They're going to do PFPs. They're going to, work on the little things that are maybe keeping them from being successful, and they just show up and do their job. Like, I mean, is that similar, or is that, like, what is your thoughts on that?
Exactly. What's the question you're asking?
Like, well, I'm asking, like, do you think that mindset is the same mindset it takes to go make those changes, or is that is that something different? Is that more, I guess I really don't know what the question is.
I
Yeah,
think
no,
I think when you've got athletes, you go from high school, you go from youth to high school to travel ball, and travel ball is so different than the next level, right? And so travel ball is kind of, we go on the weekends, we play. Like you said, they don't practice enough. They
yeah,
play, so there's no preparation. So they're not used to preparing. Well, when you
yeah,
get to the next level, you better be prepared. What
right,
separates some of those really good coaches from the others is a preparation piece. And so when they get to that level, they haven't been trained that way. So you start figuring out who really wants to play at that level. Who wants to put in are you interested or invested in playing on the collegiate level? I think there's a lot of great players that they think they're supposed to go to college because they've been doing it their whole lives and their parents said they need to do it. But once they get there, how many are really invested in playing for a program that has high standards and high expectations? There's also lower levels or other teams that the standards aren't the same.
right.
So I think the ones that really want to do it, they figure stuff out. I've had some players that I brought in. I'm like, this player's gonna be great. That just wasn't very invested. We're just there because that was their expectations. And some were really good players that just never reached their full potential. And then you've got some that came in and you're like, this is just kind of a piece. And then they start working their butts off and start really wanting to learn. And that's when they start taking accountability of their thought process and their abilities and their work ethic and their, all that stuff. So
I'd love to learn more about that, and I guess the 2 times a week that we have them, I don't know if we have time to sit down and have conversations, but maybe that's one thing that we could try to do is have those conversations, ask those
yeah.
questions. How are they feeling? What are they thinking? Um, what about I know you spent some time coaching outfield too. What's your philosophy on outfielders? What do you look for players as far as kids that you're going to play or kids that you're going to recruit? Like what type of athlete, what type of outfielder do you like? Is there anything that's specific?
I like ones that can hit.
Right, right, and catch the ball. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
and I think
for
a
sure.
lot of it depends on the perfect situation, right? It's big, strong outfielders that can go track a ball down and have plus arms and can hit. But I also think that you've got to recruit towards where your home stadium is.
Yeah,
When I was in Oregon, it was a big stadium. We needed some speed out there. ASU is not quite as big. So you
yeah,
can kind of get away with maybe that can really hit, that maybe doesn't run as well. So I think it kind of depends. At the end of the day, though, if you're trying to get to Oklahoma City, you better have some outfielders that can go track a ball down because Oklahoma
yeah,
City, it's a big stadium.
yeah.
So I mean, I just look for good athletes that understand the game and know the game. I think we're getting further and further away from IQ athletes. Just not a whole lot of them have the IQ because they play all the time. They don't get to learn how to play. They don't watch it. You'd be amazed how many athletes I do in camp or go around. Over the last few years, I'm like, hey, who's your favorite softball player? They have no clue. I don't
Yeah,
know. Like, think about growing up. Like we watched baseball all the time.
yeah,
Even some of the older softball players that are playing maybe on the national team or some pro ball, they could tell you when they were growing up who they looked up to and watched. You just don't see that as much anymore, and I think that hurts their IQ and their abilities to play the game sometimes.
maybe that's one of the questions, right? Hey, how much softball do you
Yeah,
and if they're watching softball, it's already a plus.
yeah.
Yeah. What are you like is there anything in the outfield fundamentally that you could share with us, like you harp on, or that it's something that you feel is non-negotiable for an outfielder,
Their
whether it's
footwork.
a throw or a
I think it's their footwork. I
footwork?
think yeah, I think their first couple steps is important. I think those are the ones that your first couple steps is what gets you the balls. The ability to go back or come forward or side to side, good routes, good angles. I think you can have somebody with plus speed that can get away with some of that stuff, but you can have some people that maybe aren't great defenders or don't have great foot speed that will get the balls they should never get to because of their first couple steps.
Yeah. And that's reading swings, paying attention to pitch location, all that good stuff.
Yeah, knowing what, you're right. The swing plane, like
Yeah,
and being on time in the outfield. I think sometimes we get flat footed out there.
yeah,
When we go live situations or we go, double fungo. If you're in the outfield receiving the ball, right, you're getting your timing. If you're behind them, you're also getting your timing. That's extra
right,
routes out there.
right, right. Okay, that's good stuff. Yeah, one of the things that I picked up doing this on a podcast with Scott Woodard was he talked a lot about backside pivoting. Going glove side and having a backside pivot versus pivoting inward. So like little things like that, I think we're trying to implement. Is there anything that you do for first step, by the way? Like, is there any type of drill that you recommend or something you do to train that first step?
Just the fundamentals every day, right? The old quarterback drills. Again, and when we do, what I was saying earlier, when I put them out there and they're, you have the one you're doing double fungo, for example, and you've got the person that's receiving the ball. Whoever's up next, I always put behind her on the side, and their job is off the bat, take your first 2 or 3 steps hard. And I think that's important. I also do just cone drills, just old like cornerback type drills of understanding how to plant and turn. Um,
Yeah,
because a lot of times they'll do it upright or they're not in their hips, and just learning how to move out there. Um, and so, but you can tell when you put them out there and you watch the timing on all three when a ball is hit, you'll see how late they are. And I will video that so they can see, oh, okay, hey, center fielder, right fielder is 2 steps ahead of the left fielder. Why?
yeah, yeah.
And
Okay.
Scotty's way smarter than I am, so he's a way better guy to ask those questions.
Yeah. No, it was funny because I got him on, and he laid down a bunch of stuff. It was good. Like he was Scott, man. He likes to talk, so
He's
it was
man,
good stuff.
I've learned so much just being around that dude.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so let's talk about recruiting a little bit. Uh, what does the process look like? Because I have kids. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I have a team full of all my whole team is new.
Okay.
There's some things that happened, and I've got a whole new group. So I've got kids that are now juniors that are, joining my team, and they're like, dude, I thought if I come to your team, I was getting recruited. And I don't know if they fully understand the process. But what does it look like for you if you're out there recruiting a player and you go watch a kid that's, let's say, a junior right now, and maybe not for your current situation, but for one of your former jobs? What does that look like for you?
I think you go through and evaluate. What's changed now is because of the portal and because of the roster limitations coming up. It's kind of changed the way you've got to manage your program and your rosters. For me, I've taken a lot of players late in the process, and I think you continue to evaluate, you continue to look, you continue to, I think a lot of teams are waiting later
Yeah,
because of the portal. And if you see the athlete that fits your program, you have some availability there. I think these young athletes need to realize we are not like September 1 is just the beginning. There's a
right.
lot of I still see some that when they're in their senior year, they get recruited and they get some opportunities, and it just happens later for some of them, and that's okay. Um, I think a lot of athletes also think, well, these are my top 10 schools. It's great. You may not get your top 10 schools. So
Yeah.
you've got to open it up and see what else is available out there. But it's, for me, when I evaluate just like I always have. And if I find somebody that I know can help my ball club out, but they've got to stay patient a little bit. The opportunities will be there. I've signed several great athletes that ended up being really good players that I signed late.
Um, because for me right now, it's funny because I'm, you know, because I always tell them too, because of the portal, like I'm not getting that rush to people that want to, they're not in a hurry. Like nobody's in a hurry right now. I feel like
Right.
exactly what you said. People are, hey, look, we're kind of done with 26s, but we might have something for somebody that pops up. But I almost feel like people think that's an excuse, but and the other thing too is I think, if players and families would just focus on getting better, like just focus on, doing what you can do to get better. And like you said earlier, making that decision, it just feels like that stuff will work itself out almost every time. I feel like,
But
you
we
know,
want to we play softball to get recruited instead of playing because we love to play, and I think
right.
we lose that. Right? When we talk about, it's not really a mental game that I was trying to talk about earlier. It's just a way to process things and a way to think. And I think we lose that side of that because recruiting has become such a big deal, and because it is what it is. Travel ball has become a moneymaker for a lot of people. Right?
Yeah.
It's a business, and it's a and these parents are spending a lot of money expecting that instead of just
Yeah.
focusing on what you can focus on and roll from there. So, um, the other piece to it is I don't know if some of these college programs know what their roster is going to look like. Just talking to some people over the last few weeks, they've had to release current commits because the roster changed in the middle of this. We knew it was coming. We had heard it was coming, but once you never know until it's put in place. And once it's put in place, now you're like, hey, I had these 25s coming in. My roster is going to be at 28. I can only be at 25. So you
Yeah.
don't have a choice. And I think college coaches get a bad rap for that. It's not their fault. It's just the way the system has been built. It's just like when we're dealing with NIL athletes. Well, I'm going to go to this school because they're offering more money. It's not their fault. That's the system we built. So you've got to take both sides of it. If you're going to get all this stuff as an athlete, well, just know when something like this comes up with the roster stuff, it's we got to do what we got to do too. So,
Yeah.
and as coaches, and the point I was trying to get is the coaches are trying to figure this out. They just don't know. They don't know what it's going to look like. They don't know. They have to keep a couple spots open at the end of the year because if the big recruit or the big transfer goes in the portal, some of those schools have legit shots at them. We've seen Oklahoma State consistently get really good players in the summer. Of course, he's going to keep spots open for that.
What are your thoughts on that side of travel ball that you did mention that it's I mean, I didn't detect anything, but like, what are your thoughts on the money side of travel ball and tournaments and things like that? Do you have an opinion or a thought on that?
Uh, I mean, it's a business, right? Where I get tired of it is where they go, it's all about the kids. Not really. Like, don't tell me that when you're hosting tournaments. There are people hosting tournaments where their kids their teams don't even play in it, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that's okay. I mean, if you're going to run a business, but call it a business, call it what it
Yeah.
is.
Right.
You've been to them. I mean, you go to a tournament, you play an hour and 15 minutes, right? Or you play two games and it rains, and they're like, well, we're not going to give you your money back. Like, that's what that is. Kids are paying.
Yeah.
There's some, you've got 37 teams out there. Well, okay. Well, I mean, that's, your top team's not paying anything to play, but your other 36 are. So
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just that's where we're at. Um,
Yeah.
but I wish we would not just play. I wish there would be some teach at that level. And I think there's some coaches that do teach, and I think there are some coaches that do a really good job.
Yeah.
And I'm not in that business with the travel ball stuff. Trust me, since I've left, I've had 3 different organizations call me and go, "Hey, you want to start a team out there?" Like, that's not my
Yeah.
world. It's not my world.
Well, those are probably smart guys whoever called you because yeah, trust me, it's I've thought about it. But yeah, so I mean, as far as it being a business, I think, there this. I mean, it takes a whole lot of time. I don't know how many people do it full time. I know I do. But I also know if I actually told you what I make, you'd laugh at me. Because it's not very smart. It's not a wise business decision or a retirement plan. But I do love it, and I kind of feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. So I'll just keep doing it. But When it comes to those events, or the tournaments that you're talking about, hour 15, what would be your like ideal scenario for a tournament or for an event where you could get enough play time, enough teaching time, and then get enough exposure? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Less teams, one facility,
Less teams. Yep.
which will never happen.
Right.
Think
'Cause you won't make any
about
money.
over the years you've coached, Randy. There's some tournaments that used to be held that you used to participate in that were great tournaments. And
Yeah.
then what killed those is, well, we went from this one facility with 30 teams to this next facility with, we added 3 facilities. Now they're an hour away from each other. Now we have 80 and we've got 120, and it just kind of grows and grows and grows. And, then now you've got to send 2, 3 coaches on the road instead of one. I mean, I remember when the Southern Force back in the day used to hold that tournament in Watkinsville, Georgia, and there was 24 teams there. I was at South Alabama. It was me and about 7 SEC coaches there, and it was great. It was all at one facility. We never had to leave. They took care of us. You got to watch everything, and they were longer games.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you just it's how many teams can we pack in there? And it's a lot. And there's so many of them.
Yeah.
There's, 6 different areas to go cover.
Yeah, I feel like every recruiting weekend this fall, I've looked up and gone, man, there's another event over here that maybe we should have went to. It's getting a little bit difficult, and then to have it all crammed into those 6 weeks or whatever. I think it's 6 weeks, right? That that we have, just seems really tough. You kind of made you made a comment to me a while back that you were getting out, right? You were going to go back to Alabama, and that you kind of felt like things were changing. I'll just use that word. Is that was that part of it? Was it the travel ball? Was it college? Was it the whole thing? Like, for you, like what led you? Is that all part of where you're at right now?
Yeah, as long as I've coached, the teach piece is important. The relationship's important. Over the last few years, I talked to coaches after each season. Coaches that had really successful seasons, and you talk to them at the end of the year, and it's like, man, they're frustrated after they've had good years, after they've went to the World Series. They're tired. You have coaches that had a great year, and then a week later they're stars in the portal. That's not what we signed up for. We signed up to teach and build relationships, and we have to, as hard as we've got to recruit on the road, now we got to recruit our own players to stay.
Yeah.
You've got some big names that left schools that loved being at their school, but they just knew that they could get more money. I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to, and it's still for some people. Some people love it. When I'm calling travel coaches in the summer because of one of their former players in the portal, I got this 3 times last summer. The first thing they said, not in the middle, the first thing was, how much NIL money you got for them. Huh. So that has nothing to do with, is it the right spot? Is it the right coaches? It's all about what can you get for them? And, that wears you down. I mean, there was a time last summer where I was on the road. I came home. I got my car to the parking lot in the airport, and I went to the next terminal to pick up a recruit and take her to the hotel. And then when I dropped her off 2 days later, I jumped back on a plane. Like, there's no rest for coaches. And we've given the athletes so much. The purpose of the NIL is great. What it's turned into is not fun. And I think when you see what the effect is going to be in a couple years, I'm already, again, I talk to these coaches all the time. Not all of them are getting the full scholarships. Some of them are getting budgets cut, because this is going to affect the whole athletic department, we all know this: football and basketball is always going to be on the front side of everything. There's going to be programs cut. There's going to be club sports created, and everybody goes, "Well, baseball, softball, safe." Why would a softball program be safe over a soccer program in the Midwest, where soccer's really good? You know, you're already seeing athletes losing their scholarships because there's a roster limitation. That money for these different scholarships, for all these added scholarships, got to come from somewhere. So I think when you put all that together, the rich will get richer, and it's going to be hard for the rest to survive. And for me personally, again, there's a lot of coaches that are still doing it that love what they do, but that piece, the business side, was not for me. Not to that point. Not to where, you can't even get on the phone call without athletes if you don't have NIL money, and the ability to transfer as much as you want now. That's tough. And I don't know if you've heard the clip by Gino Auriemma, but he's 100% right. We need to quit calling these athletes student athletes, because that's not what they are anymore. If we're going to run a business, we need to call them semi-professional athletes. And I get that's not all the way through in Division I softball, but that's at the highest level. That's what it is. And if we're going to do that, the only way to survive is going to be a business model. The biggest argument was, well, coach can leave whenever he wants. I got a feeling some of those coaches, I don't want to throw, some of those SEC coaches, I got a feeling if they left, there's a buyout somewhere. Yeah. Where, okay, if you're an athlete and you want to leave, but who's paying your buyout? When do we sign the contract that you're going to commit here for 4 years and we're going to pay you this amount of money? So I think the college game is going down a road where there's no turning back, and the model is going to have to change. And the small changes they've made now with the roster limitations, I'm not sure that's going to, what they're doing is the schools are going to start paying these athletes from that, whatever it is, 20 or 23 million, $25 million they have. That's why they gave sports more scholarships, because now they're going, oh, softball and baseball, now you've got your 25 and 34 scholarships. You don't need any extra money. But I think it's gonna affect a lot as we move forward. And for me personally, that's not the lifestyle I want to live.
For those that are unaware, tell us what the difference is in the new change to 25.
Well, the roster is now at 25, so you can no longer, back in the day, there were some schools that would have 27, 28, 30 players on their team. So it's 25. You are allowed up to 25 scholarships. And again, I heard this back, and I kind of have an idea, but I may be missing something, so apologize if I do. But you can offer up to 25 full scholarships now instead of the old 12. Now, the people I've spoken to, I haven't heard many or any say they're going to get 25 year one, maybe work their way up. So I think we're still figuring that out. But if you have 25 scholarships, there are no walk-ons anymore. So you would have to cut that down. So,
wow.
But again, that's 13 more scholarships, Randy. And it's not just a waiver, it's 13 more scholarships. So the school's got to come up with that money, because the school, athletic departments, and the university are two different entities.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the money's got to come from somewhere. That's where, and that's why Stanford's always in such a great, because their endowment's through the roof. So they've always got some of that. Not saying they're perfect, but it's not just, that money's got to come from somewhere. They're paying for those scholarships. It's not like here where a lot of junior college, it's a waiver. Hey, here's a waiver. You don't have to pay for school.
Oh, gotcha. And so, if they only use 20 of those, can they still use that money? Or is it just dead? Either.
No, you can still, you have 25 scholarships. So if you only use 20, you still got 5 more out there.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And you kind of touched on it, man. I think you said that the college game is headed to the point. We're at the point of no return, right? What does that end look like in your mind? Worst case.
You talking about just softball or athletics in general?
Athletics in general.
I think we're going down a road where you're going to see a lot of sports cut, or a lot of club sports. Yeah. They're not going to be able to afford them. And that's, I mean, I'm hearing, other sports being told, hey, don't offer anything for the next 2 years, or I think that's coming. I think some of the lesser, I don't want to say lesser sports, but some of the other sports that maybe don't get as much television time, or maybe not as good at that institution. I think you've got to make money up somewhere, and I think all the way around you're going to start seeing salaries cut, but for coaches, because you've got to figure out a way to come up with that. Again, I think it's $23 or $24 million that you can pay your athletes. That's extra money that's got to come up on top of the scholarships you're trying to give out.
Wow. Huh. Well, it sounds like it's going to be interesting over the next few years. I don't know where it's going, and I think for me anyway, I'm gonna continue doing this. But I certainly feel for those coaches, because even in my own little travel ball world, man, there's at the end of the summer, and I'm pretty beat up and tired myself, and trying to put things back together. So I can only imagine when it really depends on, the big things in your family and moving and getting a new job and all those things. Gotta be tough.
And Randy, again, I'm kind of at a different level now where I can open my mouth a little bit more. But there's always, you're always concerned about the student athletes, because they're the most. This is why I do what I do. Their mentality and their stress level and their depression, all the mental health piece. We never talk about the mental health of the coaches. The ones that really struggle at the end of the year, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're away from their families. Nobody cares. And that's disappointing, because I talk to a lot of, we'll get through the fall, and a lot of coaches like, man, I'm just tired, just exhausted. Like, yeah, man, make sure you take a break. Make sure you get some family time in. Make sure that you, and that's unfortunate, because I think we've given the athletes so much, and they deserve a lot of it. I'm all for NIL. If it's NIL, if you're getting paid for name, image, and likeness, not where you're, hey, we're going to give you, $2 million to, go, show up and play whatever sport.
Yeah.
But that's not what it is.
Are those name, image, and likeness contracts? Do they have is there any stipulation as far as their return, or is it just one-way street?
It's one-way street. They can leave whenever they want. But at the same time, you start to see it where they've got deals and the deal doesn't go through and the kids leave.
Yeah, it's crazy out there, man. We'll keep doing our piece. We'll keep trying to get kids ready. I think parents hopefully can learn a little bit from this, and and we'll all try to be a little bit better. But great having you on, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.
You've always been a class act out there. You've always been real supportive of us when you were here, and like I said, I appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate it, Randy.
Yes, sir. All right. I just want to say thanks for listening. We will continue working to elevate the sport and get caught up with those who are influential in the fast pitch community, and hopefully we can help you navigate your softball journey. If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Caught Up with Randy Kaye, or at Coach KAZ. You can also follow us on X and on Instagram using the same handles, at Coach KAZ. Thanks again for listening.
This one's for the ride. This one's for who knew I make it, just needed some time. This one's for my wife. Could have left 1,000 times just about my side.